prominent African leaders that are all over the world. You have to share us with their stories, important things, interesting stories, success stories, failure stories. If you want to know more about the project, please go to our Facebook page, like Gasam, the Message Association in Morocco, like our page. Wait for us to go live. Throw in your questions, comments, everything, and we shall deal with them.
Coucou Gasam, vous allez bien? Gasam organise un nouveau projet intitulé le Bantaba. Ça sera chaque premier dimanche du mois sur notre page Facebook.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إخوة الكرام، نرحب بالجميع في برنامجنا غزم بنتبا الذي سيكون في كل نهاية
Integrate connecting. Bantaba. What? Hey, there's someone Bantaba. Because something you can program through. We have so many books to read, but I have some movie in my set up over body. I don't have the time. You don't say that I have Bantaba. I'm there. You know how important this Bantaba is. Gasam, the executive, they are organizing all these activities. Gasam weekly Watan, Gasam monthly Bantaba, capacity building training, etc. This year, Gasam has brought to you a new program called the Gasam Bantaba, which comes to you Monday. People from different walks of lives are invited to discuss various topics ranging from education, health, politics, entrepreneurship, sport, culture, etc. And I believe these discussions will be very important to us as students and also as future leaders. Gasamians are urged to follow these programs and also support our social media platforms by subscribing to our YouTube channel, following our Instagram page, and sharing videos. We can also urge our friends from other nationalities to be following our program as we portray the voice of Gambia. You are right. Gasam should Gasam lah.
Gasam special Bantaba.
Dan for the Bantaba, into guys connecting. Bantaba, what? Hey, Gasam only Bantaba. Gasam din yung program to. We have so many books to read, but I have some movie in my set up over body. I don't have that time, so it don't set ever Gasam Bantaba. I'm there. You know how important this Bantaba is. Gasam, the executive, they are organizing all these activities. The Gasam Weekly Watan, Gasam Monthly Bantaba, capacity building training, etc. This year, Gasam has brought to you a new program called the Gasam Bantaba, which comes to you Monday. People from different walks of lives are invited to discuss various topics ranging from education, health, politics, entrepreneurship, sport, culture, etc. And I believe these discussions will be very important to us as students and also as future leaders. Gasamians are urged to follow these programs and also support our social media platforms by subscribing to our YouTube channel, following our Instagram page, and sharing videos. We can also urge our friends from other nationalities to be following our program as we portray the image of Gambia. You are right. Gasam, Gasam lah. It's time for the Bantaba. Ain't you guys connecting? Bantaba, what? Hey, Gasam only Bantaba. Gasam din yung program to. We have so many books to read, but I have some movie in my set up over body. I don't have that time, so it don't set ever Gasam Bantaba. I'm there. You know how important this Bantaba is. Gasam, the executive, they are organizing all these activities. The Gasam Weekly Watan, Gasam Monthly Bantaba, capacity building training, etc. This year, Gasam has brought to you a new program called the Gasam Bantaba, which comes to you Monday. People from different walks of lives are invited to discuss various topics ranging from education, health, politics, entrepreneurship, sport, culture, etc. And I believe these discussions will be very important to us as students and also as future leaders. Gasamians are
Welcome, beautiful audience and listeners. Welcome to another episode of the Gasam Monthly Bantaba, Monthly Special Bantaba. And here I am your host, and this is Ceesay. And well, today we're gonna have a very important discussion here on this platform. We're talking about the importance of one's career. So before we go further, I would like to give the floor to my co-host, to say some few words, and we'll give it over to this.
Thank you very much, Salim. I greet you all of one of the listeners. I am Sid Gama as here and topic is very important to give the impact of one's career.
Yeah, so there we go. We're really sorry we cannot have Madam our joke today because he has a funeral. Our joke is a type of condolences. If you're watching this, I'm really sorry for that. It's supposed to be here, but it's not. So we have Dr. Jaiteh and we have Mr. Ousainou Ceesay. So first of all, before we go further, we would like to give the floor to Jaiteh to say some few words and also welcome you on the Gasam platform. Welcome, Dr. Jaiteh. Yes, Dr. Jaiteh, are you hearing me? Yeah, well, see, we very can update and see what is very important. So we got it. Okay, what do you say? Well, yes. Welcome, Doctor, to the platform. You know, so Zero, okay, Zero is in. Okay. Welcome to the Gasam Monthly Bantaba, where we have Ceesay as one of the panelists here. She's right, he's around. We're supposed to have our job, but she's not around. Due to some circumstances being happened to. So we welcome Mr. Ceesay, the General Manager of High Farm Limited, Gambia. So Usain, welcome to the platform. And also, can you tell us briefly about yourself, Usain, your life and your school career as it unfolds? Welcome, Mr. Usain Ceesay, to the platform. Yeah. Usain is not there. So, Cebu is like we having problems people in the Gambia having problems with their life. Yeah, so we're gonna have a very interesting topic to discuss with them. These people are people that have really have experience in youth work since childhood. They have been working. And Usain, if you remember very well, he's president of Gasam. Likewise, Jaiteh too, the president of Gasam. So they have a lot to discuss.
Yeah, so many so we have been with you since long time, since they were young. So I believe today's discussion is going to be very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So the topic is very important.
It's really important. So Usain, can you hear us? Usain, and Dr. Jaiteh, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, I can
Okay,
hear you.
thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Doctor. Well, it's a pleasure to have you guys around. Really, we are so happy. I know everybody watching this will be very, very happy to see one of the alumni in one of the top positions in our country, serving our motherland, representing the Gambia to the higher heights. So, welcome, Dr. Jared, to the platform once again. Welcome to see. So, before we go into the topic proper, we would like you to give us a brief introduction of yourselves. Let's start with Dr. Jaiteh there. Dr. Jaiteh, can you please tell us briefly about yourself, Dr. Jaiteh, where you've passed through and to the level that you were here, you were in the Gambia today as at the same time, working as a versatile soldier in the RBT.
Yeah, thank you very much to Gasam for organizing this special Bantaba and inviting me as one of the guests. I'm truly honored to be amongst you today. So basically, I was one of you, actually. I was a student back in Morocco and a member of Gasam. Currently, I am a general surgeon. I work in Banjul at Edward Francis Wong Teaching Hospital as a consultant general surgeon. And I also lecture at the University of the Gambia as a senior lecturer in surgery. Prior to that, like I mentioned, I was a student back in Morocco. I did my medical studies over there. And I also did my specialization, my residency training that led to a consultancy with a few years of experience as well. So basically, in a nutshell, that is a brief introduction of myself.
Wow, what a great introduction, Doctor. And we are very happy for you. So, there we go again, Usainu. Say we are. You can tell Usainu to tell us something about it.
Then you can also give us a brief introduction of yourself, your schooling, and a brief background of yourself, how you come to the
Is Usainu on the line? Usainu left. I know he's having a problem. So, Doctor, before Usainu comes, we still continue with Doctor. We have him around still. So, Doctor, well, can you tell us the school that you have graduated from in the Gambia before coming to Morocco and the scholarship and everything? Because we know that was back then in 2006, something like that. That was a long time ago, and we understand this education system in the Gambia by then, and also having scholarship to come to abroad, and there was nothing like Gasam. How was those days before we actually get into the topic? Can you please tell us briefly about that? Well, we try to have to see you on the line.
So prior to coming to Morocco, I actually graduated from the Gambia Methodist Academy in 2003. So I came to Morocco in 2004, and obviously I did French like all of you before heading off to the Faculty of Medicine and Pharmacy in Rabat. Back in those days, it's quite different from what obtains now. The numbers were quite few. We were actually the second batch that came to Morocco in recent history. It was about 20 of us who came that particular year, and that was a big number considering the fact that the first batch had only about, I think, 6 students who came from the Gambia. So when we came in, we didn't have seniors per se on the ground because the first batch was not on the ground in Rabat. That was where most of us, if not all of us, were doing our French language course. So we were seniors to ourselves in a way because we had no senior Gambians, actually, students to show us the way. So we had to actually find our way. Obviously, with their advice, they did help whenever they could, but the distance was not really helping. And back then, there was no WhatsApp, there was Facebook, but I think it was just the beginning. So communication wasn't very, very good. So we had to really find our way through. We had to struggle in a way. But I think all these were good experiences because they helped us become what we are today. I can happily say that almost all of them from that batch have actually graduated. I was the last actually to come back home from that batch. I spent about 16 years in Morocco. So it's actually one of the longest standing ones who spend most of the time. But again, I think our experiences, our struggles have really helped shape us into what we have become in the society. And most of us are people with big responsibilities and happy that we've gone through that experience that we did.
That was indeed interesting. I don't know if we still have Ousainou there. Ousainou, are you hearing us? Ousainou Ceesay. Ousainou is like are you hearing us, Ousainou?
Are you hearing Hussein? Hello? I think we're still having problems getting connecting.
Yeah, we still have problems. Doctor, that was really interesting. It was really interesting knowing like coming from Gambia those days, and you have no senior on the ground to help you. Before us, we have studies here, despite Gasam here. So because of coming those days that you have few people on the ground, it will be very challenging. Doctor, you come to a lot, and then we're really proud of you. The whole Gambia is proud of you. Anybody that knows Dr. Jaiteh, I know where he passes through. Morocco studying here is never easy. Studying abroad is not easy. So we're really proud of you, Dr. Jaiteh. So I don't know whether we are still having Ousainou on the line. Ousainou. Mr. Ceesay. Ousainou is having a problem with his taboo. So say we go into the topic, where if Ousainou come, we can give him time to tell us about himself. So we go into the topic. There you go.
So Dr. Jaiteh, as we have mentioned in the introduction, the topic today is the impact of youth work on one's career. So, but before we get into the topic proper, there are two things here. We have youth work and career also. So before one knows the impact of youth work on career, we first of all need to know what these things are. So we would like you to tell us what is youth work, Mr. Dr. Jaiteh. Hello?
We are hearing you, Doctor. Can you please speak up? It's like you're talking, but we're hearing you, Doctor.
Okay, I think my mic was off. So I was just saying thank you for that question. I think youth work, like you mentioned, I think it's a term that defines itself. But if we were to go with an academic definition, I would say youth work is any activity that intentionally seeks to impact young people, hence the term youth work. And I think it can come in various ways, forms and shapes. It can come in the form of voluntary participation in relationship with young people. It can be both in a formal or a friendly environment. And when it comes to, for example, the context of Gasam, I think youth work can be assimilated to, for example, student leadership, because the students over there, obviously your primary role is for studies, but you can be involved in activities that are related to young people, such as yourselves. And student leadership is a great example of that. So basically, in a nutshell, I think that's a definition of what youth work can be in the context of student leadership.
Thank you very much. That's very clear.
Yeah, indeed, really clear and it's brief. So, Dr. Jaiteh, now let's try to link things here between youth work in the Gambia and here in Morocco. So let's say you tell us, Dr. Jaiteh, what are some of the things that you went through as a youth work leader, as a youth leader here in Morocco? Before we try to have Kushina on the line. Please try to throw more light for that, a bit of history about the association and how youth work impacted you through your journey as a medical student in the field.
Okay. So my experience with youth work in Morocco started actually from my first week in Morocco. Like I mentioned in my introduction, we did have seniors who came before us, but because of the distance, we weren't always in touch. And some of the things we had to find our own ways through. And myself, having been involved in some sort of youth work well before arriving in Morocco, as far back as I can recall, I've been involved in some form of youth work since back in my middle school, whether it was actually being a class prefect or a school prefect or being part of youth associations like Lend a Hand. There was a computer association as well that I was quite an active member of and a president of, that is the Youth Association of Computer Technology in the Gambia. So I had some exposure to youth work prior to coming to Morocco. So that really helped me when I got there, in the sense that we found ourselves in a new environment with a new culture, a new tradition, and a new language as well. So when we got there, in a way that we would be able to find our way through. So okay. There's some echoes over there. So basically, when we got there, there's some echoes over there. So basically, when we got there, we actually Yes, I'm hearing some echoes that are coming back on my.
Please mute your mic.
Yes, I'm hearing some echoes that are.
Please mute your mic. So how is it? I think it's okay now. Now, please continue.
Yes. So upon our arrival in Morocco, I personally had to sort of help in a way that those experiences rather helped me in a way that we were able to organize ourselves so that we'd be able to get through that new environment. For instance, I had to sort of act as a de facto leader, although there were no formalities concerning that. But then we had to find a way of getting through. We had to organize ourselves, and I personally had to help. For example, I also had the advantage of being able to speak a little bit of French before getting to Morocco. So basically, when it had to come with paperwork, we had to organize ourselves in a way that we'd be able to get the paperwork done without having seniors around. Communication was also an issue, but thankfully, with the little that I knew in the language, I was able to at least get my way around. So I think from the early onset of my arrival there, I was sort of like entrusted with that responsibility, whether intentionally or unintentionally, but I found myself in that position. And I was able to thankfully count on my experiences from the past to be able to at least face some of the challenges that we had when we came in. So we had to quickly catch up, for example, with the French and the Arabic that we had at that time. So I think, again, coming back to the experience that I had in my middle and high school, that really helped me pick up the challenge of helping to lead the group that we had at that point in time. And that culminated in my selection as being vice president on our second week of arrival in Morocco. So that was how I became vice president of Gasam just a month into arriving into Morocco.
Wow, interesting. I don't know if you have to say
Dr. Jaiteh, that was very interesting. How you came up, starting from the beginning. It was really interesting.
I could see with the terms of the people from Balkan was really leader and helps him a lot, and he did organize something like this, the feedback with the family after the
Great work.
so we have improvement. So this is exactly it's like having him for the life supporting. But we nonetheless we try to continue with the data for now because there is some time. Let's continue. So, Doctor, can you please tell us, because you know about youth work and career, because we're in talk of youth work and career. So you tell us about the youth work. Could you please elaborate on career also? Maybe in 3 minutes, then we move on, because we have had problems in getting this.
Sorry, I didn't get that question. What was it?
Yeah, I'm saying, it's about youth work and career, the impact of youth work on career. You've already told us about what is youth work, and you've given us examples, instances where you were youth work from home. So you want to tell us about what is career in your own words. How will you define career to be?
Okay. Yeah. So I think a career, again, the definition academically, you could say a career is sort of like an occupation that's undertaken for a significant period of a person's life. And with the opportunity for that person to progress. For example, my career, I'm a medical doctor. So, I mean, that's something that it's an occupation that's, it's something that I love doing. It's something that I'm doing for a living, and it's something that I can progress in. So it's a lifelong project that somebody can be involved in and can find satisfaction both personally and professionally in.
Mm-hmm. Doctor, we're having difficulties getting you.
Hello?
Yeah, it's good now. Go ahead.
Okay, so I was basically defining what a career was. I was just saying that a career can be defined as an undertaking for a significant period of a person's life, and with opportunities of progressing in that particular activity. So, for instance, if somebody was a lawyer, that individual would dedicate a good part of their higher education in studying law, and eventually become a lawyer and evolve as a lawyer, and probably to a judge if need be. So that's something that, again, that individual will be able to find personal satisfaction in. They'll be able to find professional satisfaction in as well. So it's a lifelong project in which an individual can be involved in.
Thank you, Doctor, for that. That was at least it was really clear, and everybody listening will have to learn from that. So now, Ousainou, can you hear us, Ousainou? Hello, Ousainou? It's a problem having him on the line. Really, I don't know what this is. Ousainou, the mic is through there. Ousainou, can you please?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, thank you, Alhamdulillah. We may have you on the line, and welcome to the platform, Ousainou. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us briefly about yourself? Then we move on.
Thank you so very much.
Yes, your line is breaking.
Much of a graduate of Agam. Yes, Ousainou Ceesay is a graduate of Gambia Senior Secondary School. I graduated in the 2013, after which in late 2015 or late 2014,
Mm-hmm.
I had a scholarship for Morocco, and then that's where I attained my degree in administration and business management on network.
Hello?
And my apologies for that.
Yeah, can you please take it back again? Maybe slowly this time. You were saying something like you graduated from the Gambia Senior Secondary School. We get that point, but the other ones of the, can you please take it back from there?
Yes, after my graduation in 2013, I have a part-time work which I was involved in for about a year. Then late 2014, that's when I traveled to Morocco under a scholarship, a government scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
And then just the normal routine. After the French year, I was I got admission to École Supérieure de Technology of Casablanca, AST. That's where I did my diploma in human resource management or an associate degree. Then from there, I was back to Rabat to do my bachelor's degree in administration and business management.
Well, indeed.
Yeah, and then
so that was that was really good.
That was Darius Timothy. As we know, the topic we have already done the introduction with
okay.
We'll come back to you. So you tell us something about youth, what is youth work and what is career in your own way.
Okay, thank you so very much. Basically, to my own understanding, youth work is any activity that impact young people. You know, that help them build their help them in personal development. You know, build their social skills and then other soft skills. So basically, is any activity that guide youth towards his or her own personal development, in which through which that particular youth can impact his or her own society and a country at large.
Indeed, that was really a good one.
Yeah.
Indeed, and now we move to career. Career, your own words. What would you?
Yeah,
how would you define
career in my own perspective is anything that you do to earn your living. Yeah, anything that you do to earn your living, and then most of the times it involves some extent of training, and it consumes a huge part of your personal life as well. Yeah, so a career is anything that you engage in yourself for your livelihood. That I will call a career.
Okay, that was really good. Yeah, so Ousainou, can you please also give us a background about your becoming president in Gasam? How was youth work? How does youth work? Because we think about youth work and career. Now let's put these two together.
Yeah.
And in the context of Morocco here, like how was it like for you being a youth leader? Were you a youth leader before in the Gambia? Talk to us about your youth leadership. How was it and in Morocco here?
Yes, as a youth in the Gambia, I was involved in some activities. I was a member of the Gambia Red Cross Society, which we call a university of its own. It's a movement or an organization that we learn a lot as youth. It groomed us to be leaders per se. So during my stay in Morocco as a student, during my first years, I observed how things were going with the association and all that. So I feel that I believe that I can at least contribute to my quota towards the development of the association as a youth with a little bit of experience in youth work and then small leadership positions before. I realized that okay, I can probably engage myself into leadership with Gasam, learn from it, and also contribute my quota towards the development. So that was my motivation why I joined a contest for presidency, and unfortunately, I was honored with that position. And then I did my best and served Gasam with the skills I learned from youth work and all. I was able to make a little bit of visible changes per se.
Yeah, so that was really good.
Yeah, leader is basically developing your personal self, your soft skills, and your hard skills. So it is really, really important. So
Exactly.
okay, we will go to Dr. Jaiteh. Dr. Jaiteh.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yes. So Dr. Jaiteh, we will come to you. What we'll ask you. You can tell us what those youth work entail. When you talk about youth work, what is involved in youth?
Doctor, can you hear us? Hello, doctor.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't get that question.
Okay. What I was asking is, we would like you to tell us what youth work entails. What are involved in youth? When you talk about youth work, what's involved in it?
Yeah, so youth work in its different forms or shapes. First of all, it involves self-sacrifice. It involves self-sacrifice. It involves commitment, not just to oneself, but to others, and to an ideal that you're trying to achieve for your community that you're serving. Again, I'll bring it back to the example of student leadership, because I think that makes a lot of sense in this context. For example, somebody serving on the executive board or being in the executive group of Gasam would be doing some form of youth work, in the sense that they're committing their self and their time for the betterment of the student union. This would mean that they would have to not just look after themselves, but then also take on the problem of the community on their own time. And this is something that requires a lot of self-sacrifice and selflessness. So again, I think in a nutshell, looking at the context of student leadership, I think youth work it entails giving oneself or one's services for the greater good of the community that you're serving.
That was really a good one, doctor. Indeed, it involves a lot of self-sacrifice and a lot of commitment too. Yeah. So say we move on to you too. Are you hearing me?
Hearing you.
Ousainou? Yeah, good.
Yes,
you.
I'm hearing you.
We know Dr. have said told us about what youth work entails, because we really sacrifice the commitment. We all are youth workers as we're speaking now.
Right.
So is youth work relevant to your career? Because we are not doing youth work. We don't get we're pursuing a career, but we don't get there. But you were a youth leader before, and hopefully you are a student officer in the community. So we tell us what relevance does this youth work you do have on your career as we speak.
Okay, thank you so very much. That's an interesting question, because as we define youth work to be any activity that impacts a young person, and career being a livelihood per se. So I think there is a significant relationship between these two variables. Yeah. So the impact of youth work in career is huge, and then it cannot be like emphasized in a time. Yeah. So I will just try to put it to perspective. I put it to perspective because I believe youth work it explore your potentials. It unblocks your potentials so that you can be a performer in any environment you find yourself. A reference from myself, I like, because generally, let's take an example of a classroom where you have the A students and then the average students. Yep. And in the Gambian context, generally the A students did not engage much in youth work because they are so concerned with their A's. And then time to time you have the B students engage in youth work and all that. So academically, those that are not engaged in youth work are not that much like A students that does not engage in youth work are A students in general. So the B students are the ones generally involved in youth work. So because in the classroom, what you develop there, I'll say it's your IQ, it's your intellectual capacity, your intellectual intelligence. Yeah, like it's what to think. What to think is what you are taught in the classroom. But now, what youth work teach you is unlock your emotional intelligence, because we have three types of intelligence per se. We have the IQ, which we all know, and then the EQ, and then the EQ is which is emotional intelligence or emotional quotient, and then we also have what we call a spiritual quotient. Now, an IQ can give you a job. An IQ can give you a job. That is a person without any youth work. But when you invest in youth work and your other intelligence are activated, now what will make you stay in that job or have you advance your career is actually your emotional intelligence, which I believe is only activated when you involve in youth work, because it involves dealing with people, empathizing, building your leadership skills, your communication skills and all that. Yeah. So without all these soft skills, one cannot thrive very well in your own career. And then youth work is an environment that unlocks all these skills in a person. So I believe the relationship between youth work and your career is the youth work is actually a key in accelerating your career.
Exactly. Exactly. So tell us, Usain, a bit, like, because you are administrative officer, like you just graduated here, and when back home,
Yes.
you work a bit and you
Yes.
take the position of being administrative manager of your company.
Yes.
So tell us,
Yes.
the youth work must have an impact on that. How does it impact you personally? How does it impact you
Of course.
towards your work,
Of course.
promotions you have at work?
Yes, because as an administrative manager, I manage a number of people, a personnel of about, let's say, 20 people or so, whose task or responsibilities or objectives are actually designed by myself. I have a relationship between There's a relationship between me and this particular people. We have to interact daily, we have to communicate daily, and then we have to set objectives together. So my experience in youth work, because I have been a secretary for the Red Cross and then also a leader and all those things. So the story behind my experience as a youth worker, I have learned so much. I have learned some leadership skills, some public speaking skills, and all that. So because of these soft skills I have acquired as a youth worker, I am able to coordinate and manage a team. I am able to communicate in a very understanding manner to my superiors and my subordinates. So the impact of youth work is clearly visible in any work environment. You can tell someone who has been involved in youth work and someone who has not been involved in youth work in a particular setting, when they speak, when they interact, when they you can tell from their behavior in general. So to summarize, youth work have actually helped me in becoming what I am today, and I believe it will also help in accelerating my career.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much, Mr. Ceesay. Dr. and Ceesay, we have our first break. It's like 2 minutes break, then we'll be right back. Please, if you're watching this, we urge you to share the stream, and we have a break, just 2 minutes break. We'll be back. So, yeah, so we have a break. Welcome back, listeners, and we are live again. So, Dr. Jaiteh, Mr. Ceesay, welcome back after a short break. We please urge people to start sponsoring us because we are really struggling with this. We really need sponsors. Anybody watching Dr. Jaiteh or Zeru, high five, you can at least try to sponsor our program. Only Bantaba. So, Zeru,
Yes.
there we go.
Yes, thank you very much, Alex. Just okay from the break. We go to Dr. Jaiteh now. Dr. Jaiteh, you have mentioned about so many challenges you faced during your course year. Since you were one of those, you faced back. There were no seniors to assist you. There are a lot of challenges on the ground. So, how do you overcome those challenges?
Thank you for that question. Just before answering that question, I just want to go back a little bit on some of the good things or the advantages of youth work. Ousainou, you touched on quite a number of them. I just want to highlight a few others. I think, first of all, youth work, I think it helps develop your sense of responsibility. Like I mentioned, it's about self-sacrifice. So it's not just about your one individual self, but it's also about serving others. So I think that's a very, very, very important point when it comes to youth work. It helps you develop that sense of responsibility, not just to oneself, but to your community. And I think that's one important aspect in nation building. We should be able to at least look at the collectivity, not just the individual per se, because a nation can only build collectively. I think it also helps in your ability to network, because you're always in contact with decision makers and policymakers as well. Your interaction with these individuals and trying to negotiate the interest of your group also helps you develop those soft skills that can serve you in your career afterwards. You tend to be somebody who has that art of convincing, somebody who's able to negotiate. Whether you work in a firm, you'll be able to better negotiate your contracts. So I think that's something that youth work or student leadership can help you get. I think you become a better manager as well. You're able to manage your time. Again, coming back to the example of students, you have your coursework, you have other activities as well. For example, whenever a student has a problem with AMCE for their bourse or something, it's student leadership that steps in. So those involved in that student leadership role tend to juggle a lot of things at the same time. So that's multitasking. And I think youth work helps you to be able to better do that, be able to do several tasks at the same time and do it efficiently. Obviously, mistakes are bound to happen as when you're involved in a collective or a group. But I think those mistakes tend to help develop you better, because eventually you learn from those mistakes and you tend to know how to manage them. And it's good that you make those mistakes at that level as a youth, because some of those mistakes, if they're made at a career or professional level, the consequences are a lot more dire compared to when it's at the youth level. And I think it also helps to teach you about yourself as well, because most of us, especially in Gambia, we tend to be very timid and we shy away from responsibility. But you realize if some people are pushed into actually taking some roles when it comes to youth work, they realize they have some capabilities and capacities that they did not know they have. So you tend to discover yourself in youth work when you do engage yourself in that. You tend to realize you might have organizational skills. For example, this Bantaba that's being organized right now, it's very well coordinated. I must say that Gasam has come a very long way since I was president. And whenever I see activities like this, I'm quite impressed and happy, because I'm seeing the evolution over time of Gasam as an organization, and the way you guys are coming about professionally and doing these things. It's really encouraging. And I'm sure some of you might have been doing it before, but some of you just started there, and perhaps you did not know that you had these skills. So I think youth work in itself is bringing out the best in you. And I think that's something that is quite important. And all these skills are lifelong skills. These are things that you're going to take along with you and you're going to develop with time in your career. So these are very, very important things. You tend to be a lot more tolerant as well, because you're dealing with people or individuals from diverse backgrounds, people who think differently from you. So if you're involved in youth work, you tend to learn how to manage and be able to get along with people, or at least bring them along to your vision of things, into the direction that you want to take the organization or the community into. And that takes a lot of practice. That is not something that most of us are born with. Some might be naturally gifted leaders, but most of us have to learn how to be leaders. And I think these are opportunities that can actually help us get to that. And obviously, I think it looks great on your CV, although it might not be the principal driving factor. But it's always good when you have had some sort of youth work or some leadership position that you've held. If you're applying for a job position and candidates, or you're applying with somebody else and you have almost similar qualifications, your experience as a youth worker or as a leader might make that difference in you getting that job or not. So I think it's something that, in my opinion, has had a lot of impact in my profession, actually. And I think anybody who is involved in youth work would see the difference. And I would encourage all of us to actually go into youth work. My intention was just to have a few words concerning that, but apparently it went beyond that. So now, coming back to your question of challenges when it comes to youth work, I think the most obvious thing is it's time consuming, because it's not just about your affairs, but it's also the affair of others, youth in this case. So obviously it's going to take a lot of your time. So perhaps you're not going to be watching your favorite series as often as you would if you weren't a youth worker. Maybe you're not going to be hanging out with your friends on the weekend as often as you might want to. But again, that might be a challenge, but I think it depends on how you look at it, whether it's a glass half full or a glass half empty. Because if you know that you have X, Y, and Z to do, you tend to be a little bit more organized, and you would spend very little time, or very little of your time would be wasted, because you'd make sure that you organize your day in a way that you'd be able to do everything you want to accomplish in that particular day. So you tend to be a better organizer. You're going to put in more effort. That's one of the challenges of youth work, meaning that it's going to be very intensive. Again, it's not just about you, yourself, and your problems, but then it's others as well. So it takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort. And I think this is something that tends to discourage a lot of young people from getting into youth work, because of the effort that it demands. But just like everything in life, it tends to get easier as you go along the way. At the beginning, it might take a lot of effort to do maybe one or two things, but the more you do it, the better you become at it, and the more familiar it is, the less effort and time that you take in getting that done. And the other point would be, it tends to be a little bit conflicting at times. And what I mean by that is that I alluded to the example of a community where you had diverse people from different backgrounds. That can be a bit of a challenge, especially when people don't see things the way you do. So as a youth worker, you might be bumping heads once in a while, or you might be stepping on a few toes. That can seem as a challenge, but again, I think every challenge is an opportunity. It just depends on how you look at it. That kind of scenario, I think, if handled in the right way, it can actually help you hone your negotiating skills, and you become a better manager and be able to direct people or the organization or the community that you're serving into the direction you want to get to. So in a nutshell, basically, I think these are the challenges that you might face as a youth worker.
Exactly. Oh, really interesting. It was a lecture, Doctor. Thank you very much. We've learned a lot and really got inspired. So Ousainou, now we move to Ousainou. So actually, Doctor mentioned a lot of challenges, and he also mentioned the ways we can overcome those challenges. So, what importance in your own Ousainou, what importance does youth work have on our community? Because like, we cannot say youth work and leave communities behind. Because if you tend to be a youth worker, you always want to be in the forefront, you want to be a problem solver, you want to be committed to things. So, see, can you tell us what are the importance that this youth work may have in our communities and our nation at large?
Okay, thank you so very much. First, I think youth work is the driving factor for any community's development. Yeah, if we take example of the developed countries, it is developed actually by their youths, because they were groomed at a very early stage. They were involved in activities that will hack their potentials and all. Yeah, but that's why I said that from time to time we'll see a very young Asian, will do things that will wow the world as a very young person. Yeah, that is just their involvement in youth work, and they are groomed, and then their potentials are reached as a youth. So if the impact of youth in our youth work in our community is we have a disciplined community, because youth work will put ethics on a person. You'll be you'll be self-disciplined, you'll be self-motivated, and then you'll be goal-oriented. So if a person possesses these characteristics, obviously any environment this person find him or herself, he will impact the community positively. That is development. So that's why I said initially it's a driving factor for any community's development. And then as disciplined youths, we are obviously ethical, and then we have good conduct. So it will obviously, if every youth in a particular community engage in youth work, I believe there will be low crime rate, because we will not have time to indulge in things that will elevate the crime rate. We will be in things that will be productive, like entrepreneurship, sensitization programs, and all those things. So all these things are driving factors for both economic and social development. So it's a key to development, both for a community, a nation, and the world at large.
Indeed. That was really important, especially talking about the commitment you have. Normally, if you have a lot of work to do, you have this to do, you have a Bantaba to do, you have this to do. Obviously, you will have time to do things in the community. It will impact the community in that way. There will no crime, in fact. Yeah. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, coming to Jaiteh again, we have mentioned a lot about youth work and the relevance and the importance. Now, my question will be, for somebody to be a good youth worker, there are certain qualities that you need to have for you to be a good one, not just a but a good one. So, Dr. Jaiteh, you can tell us, some of these qualities that one need to have for you to be a good leader.
Yes. So I think throughout the discussion, I think some of the points were mentioned in our discussions, but we can try and bring them out for more clarity. Again, I think from the beginning we defined what youth work was. We said it was anything that can help impact young people. That is something that is done by, with, or for young people. So in that, it means that somebody has to be selfless. You have to be willing to sort of help the greater good or the bigger community. So selflessness is important or essential in youth work. You have to have that willingness to help. The second thing would be discipline. Ousainou touched on that. I think in order to be able to achieve whatever goals you set out for yourself, you have to have that discipline to be able to follow that through. Otherwise, most projects you start, you might not end up finishing them because there might be a lack of discipline. There has to be a clear goal. A youth worker, you need to set yourself targets and have a clearly defined goal and ways of getting or achieving that goal. A good example would be if you are a musician, for example, and you're blowing a trumpet or playing the piano. The only way you can actually get people to listen to whatever you're playing is if what you're playing makes sense. There's some melody in it. And youth work or leadership has to have some sort of sense. You need to have a sense of direction, and you need to be able to communicate well. And that's the other important thing. You need to be a good communicator. You can have great ideas and want to do a lot, but if you're not able to communicate that to that community or the youth group that you're trying to serve, then you will not get far. So communication is also a very, very important quality in a youth worker. And I think you should not be afraid of making mistakes. I think, again, none of us are born with the skills that we have today. Even a child, when they're born, they learn to sit, they learn to crawl, they learn to walk. But before they actually walk, they make a lot of mistakes. They fall a lot of times. And that should not discourage you, because it's part of the learning process. You need to be willing to make mistakes, and most especially learn from those mistakes. most of us are doing, or most of you actually are doing your courses in French, but you had to learn the French language. And believe me, those who were bold enough to sort of like speak French the way it came to their mind at the beginning are the ones that tend to speak the language better, because they're not afraid of making mistakes. And with time, they learn from those mistakes, and then they become very good French speakers. So I think another quality of a good youth worker would be somebody who's willing to make calculated risks and not afraid of making mistakes in order to improve him or herself and their community.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. Also another one. We've really learned a lot of people. Yeah, so we're running out of time exactly 1 hour now. So we're running out of time. We please all listeners, those who are watching us, to share this stream so we can get more reaches. You can learn from this, not only SMEs, but any question that is any youth can actually learn from this stream. Let's have any all. So let's start from Ousainou. Please, your final remarks before we close this stream. Ousainou, can you please unmute your mic?
Yes, that's done.
Yeah, good. So your final remarks before we close.
So my final remark would be just a word of encouragement, and because youth work is full of challenges, there's a stigma attached to it, like people tend to say, okay, this is a useless guy, directionless, you are not like goal oriented, you destabilize your future per se. Those are people who don't actually know the benefits of youth work. You'll hear all these kind of things, and then if you really want to make a difference in your future, I want to believe youth work is the key. Everybody go to school, but not everybody is a youth worker. So those who went to school and are youth workers are those who are making differences, because they are able to master themselves. That is your self-awareness. They are able to build their interpersonal relationships. They know how to deal with people, how to dialogue, how to bargain, and all those things. And then they also build their social skills. So these are people who actually impact our societies positively. So my final remark would actually be to encourage every young person to engage in one way or the other in youth work. There's definitely benefit. There are benefits that are to be reaped, and then it's not a regrettable decision. Every youth worker must see the benefits in one way or the other. So I encourage all youth to indulge in such activities.
Thank you very much, Ousainou. So can we have Dr. Jaiteh? Dr. Please, before we close.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a very important topic that you brought up, that is youth work. I think it's important that we have this discussion, and I think it would go in no small measure in awakening the consciousness of young people and sort of create awareness of the importance as young people. We do not have to wait till we start working in official positions to think that we can actually impact our communities or our country as a whole. I think the change starts today. It starts from now. Just look around you. I mean, there's so much that can be done. So what we can do as young people at this stage is to offer our services for those that are in need in the community. It can be, for example, in Gasam, it can be student leadership position. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be part of the executive to be able to play your part. You can be in a subcommittee, or you can just offer your services when there are gatherings. I think there's so many ways that we can contribute as young people. It can be in the form of maybe in the villages, in your village development committee. You can also serve in that, in helping to distribute to the needy, or sort of helping to clean up the environment, or helping your services any way that you in any service that you can offer. So in a nutshell, I think what you're doing is you're preparing yourself for a leadership role in the future. Because what we realize is that sometimes we might have officials occupying very high positions, but because of the fact that they did not have any prior exposure to youth work or any related activities, they tend not to do as well as they would have if they had that kind of exposure. So I think you're not just serving your community today as a youth worker, but you're also preparing yourself for future responsibilities. So I think it's something that we should all keep at the back of our minds and ask ourselves, how can we help our community today? And how can we develop ourselves to better serve our country tomorrow?
That was really interesting, Dr. Jaiteh, and thank you very much for that final remark. And really, good work. It's prepare yourself for tomorrow. So it start from today. Prepare yourself tomorrow start from today. So I will urge all our beautiful listeners, my colleagues, to start taking up responsibilities from now, so that in the future it will not be a thing of challenge you will have. At least have some experience out of it. So,
yeah, that was it. Thank you very much, Dr. Jaiteh, for the wonderful. I will call it a lecture. This is not actually an interview. It is a lecture. Dr. Jaiteh and Mr. Ousainou, General Director and Ministry Director Manager. Thank you very much for coming. And we please all those who are watching, please sponsors are invited. Just contact the media team. We will tell you how you can sponsor us for this program. It's monthly, and next episode will be coming your way. Bye bye from our end. Bye bye. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hey, someone leave Bantaba. Something you program terus. We have so many books to read, but I have to movie my water set up over body. I don't have that time. So they don't say that ever Gasam Bantaba. I'm there. You know how important this Bantaba is. Gasam, the executive, they are organizing all these activities. The Gasam Weekly Watan, Gasam Monthly Bantaba, capacity building training, etc. This year, Gasam has brought to you a new program called the Gasam Bantaba, which comes to you monthly. People from different walks of life are invited to discuss various topics ranging from education, health, politics, entrepreneurship, sport, culture, etc. And I believe these discussions will be very important to us as students and also as future leaders. Gasamians are urged to follow these programs and also support our social media platforms by subscribing to our YouTube channel, following our Instagram page, and sharing videos. We can also urge our friends from other nationalities to be following our program as we portray the image of Gambia. You are right. You are right. Gasam, Shinyu Gasam la.
That's a special Bantaba.
Done.
Kalau hotel tadi,